Hello and welcome back to Continental Club, where we discuss the hottest topics in European football. Joining me today we have Chris Hamill and Patrick Van Straten. And what an episode we have lined up for you today, because we are looking at Faluk Arunwi's question, who has asked what transfers are some of the big European clubs linked with that they should totally 100% avoid. But before we get into that, just a quick reminder to subscribe to Euro Football Daily and hit that notification bell to never miss a Continental Club. And quite excitingly, we also have a new show to plug. Tomorrow is the launch date of the Football Pyramid. It's a new quiz show, sort of based around the idea of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Chris and Joe are our first contestants. And here's a little snippet for your enjoyment.
Right, it's Capello.
Incorrect, Chris. It was Sven-Göran Eriksson.
Get him back down a div now.
He criticised the questions and he gets one wrong at League 2 level.
Did Sven-Göran Eriksson, he got a second crack of the whip after 2002?
He did indeed. Cool, so look forward to that. Tomorrow should be dropping around 11 a.m. But back to Continental Club, because there's still a good few months of the season to be completed, and already we've seen plenty of chat around transfers that may or may not happen. So we thought today we would debate some of them that we're not so keen on. And let's start with Harry Kane, Pat, who is once again in the papers linked with a move away from Spurs.
Yeah, well, obviously, this has kind of been provoked, all this transfer talk, by that Instagram Q&A he did with Jamie Redknapp a little while ago, where he said that if he didn't feel the team was progressing, he's not just going to stay for the sake of it, which kind of contradicted stuff he'd said previously, where he was like, you know what, it's really important to me to be loyal to the club. It's really important to me to stay here with Spurs. Now it seems like he's considering his career a little more. And to be honest with you, the timing is not that great. Last summer, he was apparently the subject of a big bid from Barcelona. At least that's what the rumour mill says. But we are by far in the worst period of his career right now. Like, obviously, this is somebody who's won the Premier League Golden Boot twice. He's won a World Cup Golden Boot. He was named the PFA Young Player of the Year. He's been in the Premier League Team of the Year 4 times, which, given that he's still only 26, is nuts. But the fact is that signing Harry Kane right now is a gamble. Like, signing Harry Kane is not like signing him 3 years ago, where you were, I think, getting somebody who could rival actually Suarez and Lewandowski as the best striker in the world. He was truly that good. He was taking over 5 shots a game, which is vanishingly rare. He'd scored huge numbers of goals for Spurs in consecutive seasons. Now, I don't know. It's hard to tell with him because fitness has obviously been an issue. But even when he's been fit, even when the club has said he's fully fit, when he said he's fully fit, it seems like he hasn't quite been at the races. He can't get shots off in the way he used to. The thing that I always used to find impressive about Kane was he would take the shot a fraction of a second earlier than the defender or the keeper expected. Now he can't do that anymore. And while he cut out some of his longer shots from range, he was actually a very good shooter from the edge of the box. And it's not like he's replaced those with better efforts closer in. Last season, the first year that he didn't break 20 Premier League goals, I think he got 17 in 28 games. But his XG has gone off a cliff. Seriously. I mean, this year he's got 17 goals in 25 games, but he's been helped a lot there by penalties. He's now down at 2.8 shots, which is not good at all. 1 key pass a game. So people saying he's dropping deeper and he's more involved in play. I'm sorry, but when you watch him and when you look at his stats, that's just simply not true. He used to get involved in play a lot more. He used to be more creative than this. He's still a good passer. He's a surprisingly good passer for a centre forward. But whenever you make this criticism, people say, oh, well, that's because he's dropping deeper. He's linking things up. No, he isn't. Like, when you watch him, he isn't. He's always dropped deep. He did that ages ago, and he used to do it combined with putting up big shot numbers and big XG numbers, and he doesn't do that anymore. He's now at 0.5 expected goals and assists per game, which is down from a career high of 0.9 2 seasons ago. And actually, when you look at somebody created, a guy called Tom Warville, who's a football analyst, created a list of strikers in the Premier League this season who've played over 900 minutes, so a decent sample size, ranked by their XG per 90. And Harry Kane was 27th among strikers in the Premier League. He was between Vesely and I think Troy Deeney. That is troubling. Like, that is really, really worrying. And people have said, oh, well, Spurs have been worse. Spurs have been worse. Other people's numbers have been way better than this. Like, Ali improved since last season. Heung-min Son's numbers this season are much better than they were last season. And it just feels at this point like, yes, you can make arguments. You can say, well, look, you know, now there's been a few months out. Like, maybe he's had time to recuperate in a way that he hadn't previously because he was too stupid. Mourinho was too stupid. Levy was too stupid. Pochettino was too stupid to make him spend the time on the sideline that he needed to fully regain fitness. They should have just made him sit out and properly regain fitness. But every time he was injured for 6 weeks, he'd come back in 3. Every time they said he might be 12 weeks out, he'd come back in 8. It was just stupid. They were gambling with his future. And I think now, in order to justify signing Kane for the kind of money Spurs are going to demand, you have to tell yourself a story about why his numbers are not representative of how good he is. You have to say, well, look, Spurs have got worse. You have to say, well, look, he hasn't been fully fit and we assume he can get back to full fitness, by which you mean full fitness from 3 years ago. Like, you have to tell yourself these stories. And I think when you're signing a player for £100 million plus, you need to be absolutely certain. You need to not have those questions. You know, like signing Jadon Sancho. What is the justification that you have to make to yourself? You're like, he's homegrown. He's incredibly young. His numbers are obscene. Like, he can do basically everything. There's nothing you have to justify. With Kane now, we're at a point where you kind of have to say, well, you know, maybe that, you know, he's been disadvantaged by that. And maybe our medical team is better than Spurs' medical team, you know? And so I just think that is a big risk for somebody who has such a bad injury record. I think he's missed 52 games with injury since 2016-17, which is, you know, a whole season. And at the age of 26, that's worrying to me. So as much as I always liked Kane, as much as I certainly, you know, resented how brilliant he was 2 or 3 years ago for Spurs, now I fear for him as an investment. I think that you'd want to have an extremely thorough medical. And I don't know, for 100 mil, for 150 mil, especially now when that means even more than it did a year ago, I'm not sure I'd do it.
Fair enough. I mean, I'm not going to debate his performance because his performance has dropped off according to the numbers. I would suggest that looking at his England stats when he's in a team at the peak of their powers, particularly last summer in the run-up to the UEFA Nations League, I thought he was superb alongside Sterling and Sancho. So I think he can still do it. But yeah, I agree. For that fee, you'd want to be more certain. But it does seem like quite a good time to leave Spurs. Eriksen left in January. Vertonghen's leaving this summer. Alderweireld's getting no younger as well. Mourinho hasn't sort of achieved any bump whatsoever, really. I think he's won 11 of his 26 games in all competitions. So I can see why Kane would want to leave, but I don't think any club's going to have the money to sign him this summer or possibly the will either. Hamill, let's move on to someone else in Neymar who, you know, it's a little bit boring now because he is routinely linked with a move back to Spain. But can you see it realistically happening?
Yeah, mate, really setting me up there for my section. Thank you very much, Doogie. You're right, it is well-trodden ground, but I've picked Neymar because we are probably going to have to deal with another summer of headlines of the same sort of media diatribe being trotted out, aren't we? Because Barcelona apparently want him back, despite acquiring a lot of very expensive, shiny new toys in the last 18 months, in the form of Ousmane Dembele, in the form of Antoine Griezmann. But apparently they want to trade one of those players already to bring back the prodigal son, Neymar. Maybe at Messi's behest. They haven't won a Champions League since 2015, have they? He's in his final years. We've experienced the peak of Messi's powers. He's fought off Father Time longer than anyone expected. And he's watched sort of a lot of big money moves fail around him. Barcelona's transfer strategy not really been that well joined up, has it? They've just been going in big and overloading in certain positions. And Now under Quique Setien, they're probably no stronger than they were in their first year under Ernesto Valverde. They've not progressed since Luis Enrique, and this move looks like it represents them trying to recapture those years, rather than just moving on, rather than blooding youngsters, rather than looking ahead, in 2 or 3 years' time. They've already lost a lot of ground that they could have built up on Real Madrid, haven't they, in recent summers. So I don't think bringing Neymar back is the answer. It'd be nice to see Ansu Fati get some meaningful minutes as well. It'd be nice to see it click with Antoine Griezmann. After all, they took out a huge bank loan to facilitate the move, so they're already at breaking point in terms of their finances. And this is just a classic case of trying to recapture former glories, and I'm not sure it's going to materialise. No doubt if he went back to the club, his numbers would still be great. He's only 28. And since that €220 million move, he's put up, frightening per 90 figures in the French capital, hasn't he? As we all predicted, because of the sort of lack of competition in the bottom half of the league, that drop in quality. In 69 League and Champions League games, he scored 61 goals. He's assisted a further 33, which equates to 1.4 goal contributions a game. He's been taking the piss. And as it started to click this season, as he started to produce sort of clutch performances at meaningful moments like that game against Dortmund, obviously the rug has kind of been pulled from beneath him and beneath PSG, and maybe he's just a bit tired, maybe he's just a bit weary now, and the prospect of gearing up for another league and season once more is probably a little bit too much for his ego, because his stock has never been lower. He's almost an afterthought, isn't he? Who would now sign Neymar over someone like Jadon Sancho, or maybe even Timo Werner, if he's going to cost 1/5, 1/6 of the price? It just doesn't really make sense, does it? He's had teammate issues with his teammates as well. He's missed training. He punched that fan. He's been fined for ill discipline. He's missed 62 games with injury. This isn't the same Neymar. I would love to see him move and to recapture that sort of joie de vivre that he had. But PSG hold all the cards, don't they? He has a contract until 2022, and he's being paid pretty handsomely for giving up his peak years to play in Liga, and he's on £630,000 a week. This season in 19 League and Champions League games, 16 goals, 8 assists. So it's not like his form has dropped when he has returned. He's obviously had those fitness issues. He was obviously rushed back from injury to play in the Champions League in the same sort of manner that Pat was talking about with Harry Kane, which was not to his advantage. It was very much to try and progress the club past that cursed quarter-final mark, wasn't it? 4.8 shots, 2.7 key passes, 6.1 dribbles this season, for an expected goals and assist value of 1.36. Those numbers are so good that for me can't not equate to boredom for Neymar. Like it's just not a challenge for him, is it? And that, coupled with a sort of foggy mentality, I guess, off the pitch, is not a great combination. And with the likes of Thiago Silva's contract expiring, who was very influential in bringing him to the club this summer, Marquinhos is obviously still going to be there, but it might make the prospect of staying a little less appealing. But I see Barcelona as his only destination. They feel like the only club at the minute foolish enough to swap an Ousmane Dembele, to swap an Antoine Griezmann, and money for Neymar. Now, if they could get a like-for-like swap with Antoine Griezmann, that's not the end of the world, but that's not going to be the case. PSG aren't going to allow that. So I think Barcelona, forget about those former glories, cut your ties. Let's start building for the post-Messi era now instead of a flash in the pan approach, which is it's not served them well, has it, the last 2 or 3 seasons?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I feel like this move could have made sense last year before they signed Griezmann. Now it's really not going to happen, particularly with the state of Barcelona's finances. The final transfer we wanted to talk about in depth was one that emerged this week in Corriere dello Sport, who claim that Arsenal are going to try and include Justin Kluivert in a swap this deal for Henrikh Mkhitaryan, with about £13 million going to Roma as well. Now, it's quite clear why the Giallorossi would want Mkhitaryan. He's actually played pretty well over in Rome. He's got 6 goals and 3 assists in 13 Serie A appearances. He's had a few injury issues. And it's quite clear why Arsenal would want to get rid of Mkhitaryan as well. He's on £180,000 per week. He doesn't seemingly have the sort of the playing traits to fit into Arteta's style of play. You're seeing Ozil already struggling to really make an impact as a 10. I don't think you want Mkhitaryan, who, again, his best position is as a number 10 in there as well. But Kluivert's an interesting one. I don't think you particularly want to go for Kluivert, really. There was a lot of interest in him a few years ago when he was at Ajax, when I think he got 11 goals in 36 appearances in his final season. Earned that move to Roma. And then has been pretty underwhelming, really. I think it was 2 goals and 6 assists in 34 League and Champions League games last season. Slight improvement this year, up to 7 goals and 1 assist in 25 League and Champions League games. But it's not the sort of impact at 23 that you'd really be looking for to make a signing. And when you've got Saka coming through as a left winger, when you've got Martinelli as a left winger as well, I feel like this isn't really the area that I would go for if I was the Arsenal hierarchy. I know they're probably trying to think about what they do in a post-Aubameyang world, but I feel like there's better options there as well. I mean, you've seen them linked with Moussa Diaby this week. I feel like Leon Bailey could be available on a sort of cheap fee as well. Someone like Jeremy Boga as well at Sassuolo's had a fantastic year. And his numbers are promising, but not fantastic. So he's taking 2.2 shots, which is up from 1.4 last year. But only 1.3 key passes as a wide player, not that exciting, and that's down from 2.4 last year. And 2 dribbles per game. His expected goals and assists is about 0.24. And to be for a really solid contributor at Premier League level, you probably want to be about 0.4. So there's a 0.16 drop off there. And as I said, I just think there's better options. So I'm not overwhelmed with this Justin Kluivert potential move. Although if it means getting rid of Mkhitaryan, bringing in Justin Kluivert, I suppose it's not the worst transfer. But I just feel like there's more exciting options. But definitely get rid of Mkhitaryan. Those wages are a major sort of drain on their finances, which are already pretty tight. I've got 2 transfers that I wanted to discuss briefly with you guys. Pat, one of them is Nelson Semedo to Juventus. So according to Sport, Barcelona have agreed to sell Nelson Semedo to Juve in exchange for Pjanic, De Sciglio and £22 million. What do you make of that move from Barcelona's perspective? Do you feel like, Pjanic and De Sciglio, £22 million, pretty good deal for them?
There's no way that's true. There's just no way. There's no way Juve are going to give up Pjanic and another player and money for Nelson Semedo. It's just not. It's not going to happen. Pjanic is a lot older than Semedo, but clearly his value on the market is vastly greater. I mean, he's been linked to PSG and Man City and Chelsea and Barca in this window alone. There's no way. That's the kind of thing Sport like to say because it makes Barcelona look competent, but I think we all know they're not. And if they manage to get a deal through, I wouldn't be surprised if they sold Semedo to Juve, and I wouldn't be surprised if they got Pjanic, but there's no way that is the structure of that deal. Juventus are not morons.
Yeah, the report said that it basically valued Semedo at about close to £80 million. But basically, they argued that it's because Juventus are so keen to get Pjanic off their wage bill, because I think he's on about €8 million a season. But for me, it doesn't even really make sense from Juve's perspective as well, obviously, because Pjanic seems to fit Sarri's system probably the most of any of his midfielders. And I know Bentancur had some good appearances in that holding role, but I think you just keep hold of Pjanic for another year. So I'm not totally behind that one either. Chris, another one we want to briefly touch upon is Jan Vertonghen, who's been linked with a move to Inter Milan or Roma. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, that makes perfect sense, doesn't it? And they are the sort of clubs that are linked to these players, and people don't really scrutinise it that much because, Inter Milan in particular have such a rich history of signing ageing Premier League stars. But when Conte does it, you kind of stand up and take notice and think, okay, maybe there's 1 to 2 years more to get out of this player, and he's kind of well equipped. His style of man management has a rich history of doing so, doesn't it? They have Skriniar, they have De Vrij, so he would be a backup option. I imagine at 33 he'd be willing to accept that. I mean, it sounds perfectly feasible. Is it something that's going to excite the Inter fans? Perhaps not. But like I said, Conte is sort of an expert at turning short-term solutions into short-term success. I don't know really about Roma's defensive situation, to be perfectly honest. So I don't know if he'd be better suited, moving to Roma than Inter.
Fair. Yeah, no, I think they're trying to get Smalling through the door permanently. I'm not the biggest fan of this deal at 33. They've got Bastoni as their backup centre-half on the left-hand side already, so I'm not particularly enamoured with Jan Vertonghen moving to Inter. I just don't know why they keep on signing these octogenarian, former centre, defenders in the Premier League. I don't really fancy it. But guys, that's all we've got time for our first section. But let's move on to Big Match Preview. As we all know, the Bundesliga returned last week and our Big Match Preview slightly failed as a contest. It was Dortmund versus Schalke. Dortmund absolutely thrashed them. So we're hoping for a better one this weekend between Gladbach and Leverkusen, which takes place tomorrow on Saturday at 2:30. Host Gladbach are third, just 2 points ahead of fifth place Leverkusen now. So it's a potentially massive game in the race for Champions League qualification because there's quite a big drop-off between Leverkusen and I think it's Wolfsburg in sixth. So they've pretty much got the Europa League sewn up, but what can they do in the Champions League? That's what we'll be asking. But let's start with host Gladbach, Chris, because they started the sort of second half of the season, as it were, in pretty good form.
Yeah, Gladbach's return to Bundesliga action went pretty swimmingly, didn't it, mate? They beat Eintracht Frankfurt 3-1 with goals from Player, Thuram and Ben Sebaini, who was extremely impressive throughout the whole 90. I think he put in the most eye-catching performance, let's say. Andre Silva came on, scored a very decent goal, but apart from that, Eintracht Frankfurt didn't really offer an awful lot. It was very one-sided. XG had it down at 2.8 to 0.9. And Marco Rosa's men, outshot their opposition away from home, and the quality of their chance was much, much higher as well. So that result was their fifth win in 8 games. They've drawn 2 and lost 1 as well, obviously. And it's propelled them, hasn't it, to third place for the first time since the 25th of January. So turn of the year, we thought they were going to be the sort of outside bet for the league title, and then it was Leipzig, and now it's perhaps Borussia Mönchengladbach again. Now 6 points behind Bayern with a game against them at the Allianz to come. They beat them 2-1 at home, so they do have good form this season going into the tie. One slight concern though, despite conceding just 31 league goals, which is a figure only bettered by Bayern and by Leipzig, they haven't kept a clean sheet in 10 games since before the winter break against Hertha Berlin. They played out a bore draw there. And despite this, Jan Sommer still having a fantastic season. Definitely not his fault. 92 saves, the most in the Bundesliga, with a 74% save percentage, which is actually second in the bully behind Neuer, who's had a bit of a renaissance, hasn't he? But he's only kept 5 clean sheets in 26 games, so he's working overtime. It's just about keeping the side in it. So they are still quite fragile at times. Eintracht had some big moments against them as well. That was evidently still there, but their attack is good enough to compensate, isn't it? To bludgeon most sides, to sort of smash them into oblivion. Everyone knows about the threat of that front three, so I won't really talk about them, but I would keep an eye out for 27-year-old Cam, Jonas Hoffmann. He's missed 9 games with injury this season, but in his 1,000 bully minutes, he's contributed to 4 goals and operated at that sort of 0.4 expected goal and assist ratio that you were talking about before. So really useful player. And Ben Sebaini, I think, he's one player I'm certainly going to be keeping an eye on whilst the Bundesliga is on our televisions. 4.9 tackles and interceptions per 90, 1.5 shots, 0.7 key passes and 1.1 dribbles. So he's really got a fantastically well-rounded game. But Bayer Leverkusen have got a few players they're also pretty darn useful. So it's going to be quite a meaty tie.
Yeah, it certainly will. Because, Pat, as Chris says, they got off to a very good start on the resumption of the Bundesliga too.
Yeah, well, an away win at Werder Bremen, is not as hard this season as it has been in the past, but to win 4-1 and also keep Milot Rashica quiet was pretty impressive. I think it was their 8th win in 10 as well. And to me, this is quite an interesting matchup of sides. Like, they're quite similar in some ways. They both play back to front extremely quickly, and Leverkusen can kind of smell glory now. Like, they're just a point behind Leipzig. They're still in 5th, 8 behind Bayern, so the title's probably out of reach, but Champions League is right there for the taking, and they were really, really dominant. Havertz playing as a centre forward was extremely impressive, got a couple of goals. Weiser got one, Demirbay got one, Moussa Diaby had a fantastic game, grabbed a couple of assists. Generally speaking, I think that we know about the threat of their attack. 3 expected goals in that game, 4 goals from that, very good. But they also kept their opponents to under 1 expected goal, which is excellent. And they're miles ahead of Wolfsburg in 6th, so they don't need to worry too much. In a way, the pressure's off. Like, if they finish 5th, they'll be a bit disappointed, but there's no real threat of them slipping down the table. So they can just play to spoil the title race, really. And Havertz is hitting form at just the right time. I say that, obviously first game back after a long while out, but he started the season pretty slowly. And then in his last 14 games for Bayer, he's contributed 9 goals and 6 assists, which is absolutely wild. And they're getting production all over the place. Edmund Tapsoba, who is a 21-year-old centre-back, they've got him out of Vitória Guimarães back in January. He's been really, really good. And actually, there's quite an interesting crop of young centre-backs right now in the Bundesliga. He's played about 500 minutes so far, about 6 games. But a decent number of tackles and interceptions, about 3.5 a game. Really high tackle success rate, loads of passes, like a 92% pass accuracy with over 100 passes a match. Like, that is Petter Bosz ball. Your centre-backs getting on the ball a lot, but also having to do a lot of active defending. So I think that if you want to see, the exciting young talents that the Bundesliga is producing right now, this is as good a game as you could find. There are so many players to be excited by. And the great thing about Leverkusen is when they're not at full strength, when they don't have Folland to play up front, they play Havertz there, they just move him forward. When they don't have Leon Bailey fully fit, they're playing Bellarabi. There's so much depth all over the pitch that I just think, well, I say all over the pitch, really across the front half of the pitch, that you're bound to see somebody have an exciting game. You're bound to see somebody do something that you haven't seen before. So I think that this is a really, really exciting one. I think it's actually incredibly hard to predict as well. But I don't know. I don't really know what my heart says on this one. Like, because you feel like Gladbach has more of a chance of upsetting somebody above them, you kind of want to root for Gladbach. But Leverkusen are almost impossible not to enjoy right now. Dukes, you normally have some outrageous prediction. Are you going for like 6-5 or something in this fixture?
Well, I've slightly got my fingers burnt last week because I only went 1-0 Dortmund and they absolutely routed that in about 45 minutes. I agree with you. I think there's so much attacking potential in both sides. I can only see really like at least 3 goals. I think it's going to maybe be a 2-2 draw. The wing play is going to be fascinating. The overlaps both sides love, like just overloading the wide areas. It's going to be absolutely fascinating. And Gladbach have had slightly better at the fixture recently. They've got 7 wins from their last 12 games, but there's been no draws in that. So expect some goals. The return fixture, they actually won 2-1 at the Bay Arena, with Thuram getting what proved to be the winner in the first half. Gladbach have a couple of injuries though, so Zakaria is out and Fabian Johnson was also out. Bayer Leverkusen, meanwhile, pretty much come in with a clean bill of health. I think Volland is back to start for this weekend potentially, so it should be really interesting. So I'm going 2-2. Chris, what do you reckon?
2-1 to Gladbach.
Oh, Pat, what do you think?
I might go for an upset here. I might go 2-1 Leverkusen.
Oh, it's going to be absolutely fascinating. Tune into that at 2:30 tomorrow. Let's move on to our quickfire question. Our quickfire question this week comes from Uno V, and they ask potential transfers out of English clubs. Pat, are you worried about anyone out of Arsenal?
I'm not exactly worried, but at least one of Arsenal's strikers is going to leave. I mean, Aubameyang was pretty much nailed on to go, but now it's a question of whether anybody's got the money. They might just wait a year and try and pick him up on a free. It wouldn't be the worst idea. Lacazette, it seems like Arsenal's theory is maybe we can get somebody in return. And right now there are a couple of swap deals. Like, people are talking about him for Thomas Lemar, but there's much more smoke around him for Thomas Partey, which I think sort of sounds more plausible than I originally thought it was. But obviously Lacazette would be fantastic for Atleti. Like, he'd make a lot of sense for them. And Partey would be tremendous for Arsenal. So yeah, I'd expect at least one of those strikers to make a move, because Arsenal are probably going to try and keep their powder dry, and as a result, they've got to leverage the assets they have. So I think they'll probably try and sell Aubameyang, like, purely because he's got a year left and he's not going to sign a new deal, I don't think. So those are definitely people to keep an eye on. Plus, I think if Arsenal can keep anyone, I think they'll actually care more about keeping Bukayo Saka right now, getting him nailed down to a new deal. That's arguably more important for the future of the club.
Fair. Chris, who do you think is going to be leaving?
Well, we spoke about it a little bit on Sunday Vibes, but I hope there's not a sort of exodus at Leicester. You know, Chilwell has long been linked with a move to Manchester City and Chelsea, hasn't he? Chelsea looking the more likely destination now. James Maddison has that move to Manchester United has been touted on more than a few occasions, and I think he's the better player between him and Grealish. And think Manchester United, you know, might go in for him in a big way in the summer, which, you know, Leicester would perhaps struggle to recover from. They've been linked with Coutinho as a result. Do I see Coutinho picking Leicester over any other options he may have? No. So I think any realistic option that Leicester can bring in would either need, you know, time to bed in, which might cost them in the short term, or they'd kind of need to betray a transfer policy that served them quite well and go in, you know, for a big money signing like Coutinho and pay through the nose wage-wise. Jorginho has been linked with a move to Juventus, which kind of only makes sense, I suppose, if Pjanic moves on to Barcelona. I suppose that's where there's, you know, no smoke without fire. Is that the same? I'm going crazy in this room. So yeah, I mean, I don't think that would affect Chelsea in a major way. I really like Jorginho. His numbers have been really solid. I think he has been a little bit underrated at his time at Chelsea, but they seem to be moving away from a style that suits him. And the likes of Kovacic, you know, a really strong two-way midfielder, really good physical attributes, is kind of thriving under Lampard. Kante's place is just not up for question, is it? And he's kind of now needs to find a way to bring in Ziyech, to bring in Mount, to bring in Pulisic, and it might be at Jorginho's cost, you know. So yeah, I think Jorginho to Juventus, probably one of the more feasible ones I've heard, but a lot of things need to happen before that materialises, doesn't it? Well, We Need to Talk would have gone live at 4 o'clock on Football Daily, so go and check that out. Pat, what's the podcast on this week?
The podcast that just came out. Jesus, what was that about? Oh yeah, Ligue 1. with Henry Hill making his podcast debut, which is really good. The one that will be coming out this week is with Doogie, where we are drafting an 11, or making an 11, I should say, out of players from the bottom half of the Premier League. And I've got to say, the 11 that I kind of want it to be is pretty tasty.
Pretty spicy. I'm excited for that one too. Guys, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you later. Bye.